Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Jason Davis here with you on Soccer Morning on a Thursday morning, January 9th, 2014. We're here. We're back. We're going to be talking about soccer today. It's been a very interesting 24 hours in the world of American soccer specifically. And I imagine if you're a Roma fan or a Serie A fan, an American Serie A fan, it's been an interesting 24 hours. We've had to readjust our understanding of the world in the last 24 hours. Michael Bradley is on his way to Toronto FC. This is a very strange thing to have to deal with as an American soccer fan. I'll say that from my personal perspective, struggling with it a little bit. I think a lot of people out there are struggling with it a little bit. It's a strange thing. Michael Bradley's the best American player. That's my opinion. The best American player right now. And rather than continue the fight for time at Roma, rather than take the opportunity to go to Hellas Verona or Sampdoria or perhaps England or Germany, who may or may not have been where teams may or may not have been interested in him, he's decided to come home. Home being MLS, home not being the United States, because of course Toronto is in Canada. This is a little bit of a shock, and we'll be processing it today. We'll be talking about it today, taking your thoughts on it at Soccer Morning. We're going to talk to Doug McIntyre from ESPN FC, who has been digging and reporting on the story in about 10 minutes. Also on today's show, because other things are happening in the world besides Michael Bradley moving to MLS, we've got Tim Vickery, a South American soccer expert, BBC correspondent. We'll talk to him about the preparations in Brazil, the most recent controversy surrounding the Brazilian preparations. Sepp Blatter criticizing Brazil. You had 7 years. You're not there yet. He didn't say it that way, but that might as well be what he said. Dilma Rousseff responding, we're going to hold the cup of cups. So we'll talk to Tim about what's happening in Brazil right now as the World Cup creeps closer and closer and closer. Lots of stuff to talk about there. We unveiled yesterday, from a Soccer Morning perspective, we unveiled yesterday our campaign on Indiegogo. Soccermorning.com is the website that will redirect you to the page. Highly suggest you go check it out. Politely request you go check it out. Let me say it that way. Politely request you go check it out. We've added some things. Producer Trevor has decided that in the interest of bringing up some more contributions, he's going to cede control of the music from me. I control the music, by the way, just so if anybody's unclear about this. I control the music on this show. I've picked all of the music. Trevor had no say in it, but he is going to let you be DJ for a day on Soccer Morning. What's the level on that one, Trevor? I apologize. I don't know. $50. If you contribute $50 to Soccer Morning on the Indiegogo campaign, soccermorning.com, you can be DJ for a day on this show, which means you can either make me play really terrible music and distress everybody, or you can pick stuff you like. That's good, that we all can enjoy, and we can have we can be a community here. We can have a nice community, or you can be that jerk. Either one. Be that jerk. I don't care. So when this show was getting put together this morning, when the Michael Bradley thing was still percolating, I mean, look, this, again, it moved very quickly yesterday. I think the world, meaning the Americans who are paying attention, decided that it was done. We all accepted it was a fait accompli because the reporting being done, Taylor Twellman reported it, broke the news on Twitter. It exploded into a massive discussion, and it was subsequently reported and confirmed as a real possibility by Alexi Lawless, by Grant Wall, by Doug McIntyre, by Jeff Carlisle, by all of these reputable names, guys who know what they're doing, guys who know people who know things. They all reported it. Then Doug McIntyre reported it as being done. And we're going to talk to Doug in a couple minutes, so I don't mean to impugn his journalistic integrity. I'm not doing that. But I'm one of those people, because I am so cynical about transfer silly season. Until the player is holding up the jersey, and parading for everyone in front of the cameras, I'm not gonna totally believe it's gonna happen. I'm gonna hold back a little bit. I'm gonna reserve some doubt, just in case. Things fall apart at the last minute all the time. All the time. You hear, I mean, look, just in the world of Toronto FC, and part of the reason people are nervous about Michael Bradley going to what has been a tire fire since 2007, part of the reason people are worried, because they do things like, we are getting Diego Forlan. Are you really? Where is he? Oh, he's in South America saying that he's not coming. Really? Good one. Now, the management has changed since then. Tim Vickery is in control. Tim Vickery does not mess around. He has obviously pulled this off. And I was reserving doubt until I saw Michael Bradley in that Toronto FC jersey, or holding it up for the cameras and smiling and showing that he wants to be there and he's happy and he was not coerced. I was going to reserve some doubt. But then I this morning, Tancredi Palmieri reports it. Being Italian soccer correspondent, reports it on Twitter as being done. A link is sent out by Stephen Goff, or tweeted out by Stephen Goff, to a site called romapress.us that has a quote from what appears to be Michael Bradley's Italian representation, because he also has Ron Waxman here in the U.S., saying that it's done and he's gone and he's leaving. The choice was, here's the quotes. This is obviously translated. The choice was caused by some moves made already in the market. Not wanting to wait until January 31st, Bradley decided to follow this path, also to help the growth of American soccer. The arrival of Nangolan, question mark. He has always felt like an important player. Then his value changed. There were several requests from Serie A clubs such as Bologna and Hellas Verona, but it is a choice made because of the appreciation towards the MLS and American soccer. This is from Alberto Faccini on Radio in Italy. Okay, so there's another bit of evidence that this is done. If this is in fact Michael Bradley's Italian representation, and he is in fact on the radio, and no reason to doubt this, then it's probably done. And just because I am I just reserve that doubt. One more place to check. No Short Corners. The blog of Greg Seltzer, American soccer reporter based in Amsterdam, has a handle on almost every single European American move. Anything that happens with an American soccer player in Europe, Greg Seltzer knows about it. I go to his site this morning and I see a report from him that says that the bid by TFC has sparked a bidding war. PSV Eindhoven has tabled a bid. Werder Bremen, Wolfsburg, and we've already mentioned a couple of those Italian teams. I'm like, okay, well, there's some doubt. He might not come. It might fall apart. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it might fall apart. I'll come back a little bit later. Refresh. No Short Corners. Greg reports on the Alberto Faccini radio appearance. Okay. Get ready to line up for those Bradley shirts, TFC fans, says Greg Seltzer. Whoa, wait a second. Are we confirming this? One more time, refresh. Greg Seltzer. Roma press officer has just informed me that Michael Bradley has now been removed from the selection for tonight's Coppa Italia match. Arrivederci, Roma. It's done. I believe now. I don't think I can stand up and pretend that there's any doubt left. Michael Bradley is coming to MLS. Michael Bradley is going to TFC. What does this mean? What is going on? Your world has changed. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about that changing world with Doug McIntyre from ESPN FC. It's Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Stay there. Let's begin.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
Joining me now on the phone lines, Doug McIntyre from ESPN FC, who has been diligently reporting on Michael Bradley's imminent move to Toronto FC. And Doug, I was just talking about how I am one of those people who reserve some doubt when transfer rumors happen, because you never know until the guy's in front of the press with the jersey and everything else. But this one seems like a fait accompli at this point.
It does, yeah. I mean, at this point, it seems like it would be a surprise if it doesn't happen, although I'm with you generally. But, I mean, just there's been a number of people that have come out, said it's happening, and it seems like it's going to happen quite unbelievably. I woke up this morning like a lot of people and wondered if it was a dream, if this is really going down, but all signs point to it going down, and it's still unbelievable. It really is.
The only precedent we have for this is the Clint Dempsey move from Spurs to Seattle, and there are a couple of factors relating to Clint Dempsey that make it a little bit more understandable, even if it was shocking at the time. How much more shocking is this one?
Significantly more, I think, and you're right. I mean, we were all floored when Dempsey signed, and and if anything, that taught us not to be surprised again. And I think that was the first thought when Taylor sent out that tweet yesterday. Maybe the first reaction would have been in the past to just dismiss it out of hand because it seems so ridiculous. But after the move Dempsey made, I think everyone thought, well, wait a second, this might actually happen. Obviously, Taylor's a very credible source. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just on a different level for a number of reasons. I mean, given Bradley's age, he's only 26. Dempsey was over 30. And to go to Toronto FC, a club that's been terrible, over the course of their history. So, it's just on another level completely, in terms of surprise, in terms of shock. And I think we're all just still trying to come to terms with it and figure out what this means, why he made the move, all those sorts of things. So, it's going to be interesting as more of the details come out. My colleague Jeff Carlisle did a great job reporting some of the contract details, that sort of shed a little light on why this move financially makes sense for Michael. So it'll be interesting to see when it comes out. It'll be interesting to see when he is holding up that jersey, if he is holding up that jersey, which could be as early as Monday, we understand, and to hear him explain why he decided to make this move. I think we're all looking forward to hearing what he has to say about it.
Yeah, I saw, and it may have been Tancredi Palmieri, or it may have been somebody else, and I apologize if I'm putting this on the wrong reporter, but there seemed to be a little bit of confusion over how much Bradley is getting. Yesterday, all the talk was he's making five or six times what he's getting at Roma. That's part of the reason why this makes some sense from his side. Of course, you want to maximize your earning potential. But today, someone said it's a 6-year deal for $1 million a year. That doesn't make any sense.
I can guarantee that he would not come over for that sort of money. I mean, I think that just that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if he's coming here, and again, it looks like he is, it's going to be for money in the Clint Dempsey and the Landon Donovan range. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I'd be shocked if it's significantly less than either of those players are making. Might even end up being more. But he's going to be, and I don't know if it's 5 or 6 times the salary he was making at Roma, but he's going to be. It's safe to say that it's a healthy increase, a healthy raise over whatever he was on at Roma, which after taxes, the figure I saw was about 800,000 euros a year, so a little bit more than $1 million after taxes, of course. And tax rates are generally higher in Europe than they are in North America. Although it has to be said, the tax rates in Canada are significantly higher than they are in the U.S. So it'll be interesting to see what the figures are, the final figures. But yeah, there's no way he's coming over here without making more money, and he'll also get a portion of the transfer fee, which I think is something to consider too. But financially, this deal has to make sense for him to come over at this stage of his career. You have to think. Speaking
of the transfer fee, last I heard, somewhere between 7 and 10 million euros or dollars, because there's
again, the details are still fuzzy. I mean, there was the first figure I saw was $7 million, which is possible, but then I'd heard between 10 and 15 million. So
Wow.
I would think it would have to be comparable to the Dempsey fee, which was about 10. So you think it's probably in that range. And if the player gets 10%, I don't know, I think that's pretty standard. Then that's $1 million in his pocket right off the bat. So, but again, we'll have to see what the figures are when they come out. But I would think, right in that $10 million range is what we'll end up seeing when it's all said and done.
Which seems to have been the offer that Sunderland made to get Bradley from Roma, and that deal was obviously, that deal obviously didn't happen. And part of this thing that is a little confusing, I think, for some people, and I'll admit that I'm not a little fuzzy on this as well, is it sounds like Roma's hand was forced, that Bradley made this decision. Is that because of some kind of clause in his Roma contract? I mean, how does he force his way out to TFC, but isn't, but he can turn down the move to Sunderland? Well,
the interesting thing is, I mean, as we know, compared to Major League Soccer or any of the North American sports where a player can just be traded, they can be sent anywhere, clubs make a deal and they go. Players have a lot of say in where they end up.
Right.
So I think that, I know that I've been told that Bradley, and it's been reported by other people as well, that Bradley wanted out of Roma. With the World Cup looming, not sure about how much playing time he was going to get. Didn't want to put himself in a position where maybe he wasn't playing that much heading into a World Cup, which makes sense. So, at that point, it's just picking the place that he thinks is the best move for him long term. I mean, the first thing you think about with Sunderland is that's a team that could be relegated at the end of the season.
Yes.
So, does he want to move his family again? He has a young child, young family. So there's certainly more stability in Toronto than there would be at a club like Fulham, another place he was linked to, or Sunderland. So, you have to think about that as well. If it's an opportunity for him to be settled in one place for a number of years with a young family, it's not always easy for the families of these guys to adjust in another country. It's hard enough for the player, but the player's in an environment where they have a support system in place. They have 20 instant friends, I think is the way one athlete described it. When you go to a new city, for a player's wife or for their family, it might be a little bit harder. So we don't know what those details are. Certainly, you would think for it's Toronto's a very easy place to live, nice place to live, and from a family point of view, probably makes a little bit more sense than going to a club where he might have to move on again in another 6 months.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the family aspect is certainly playing a role, just like it did with Clint Dempsey. You mentioned the World Cup preparations, getting time. There was questions over how much time he would get at Roma, especially now they have brought in yet another midfielder. Eric Lamela wants to come back. There's so many things happening there at Fulham in the midfield. What is Jurgen Klinsmann going to make of this? We asked the same question after Dempsey moved.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be thrilled about it. I don't think he was thrilled about the Dempsey move. But the thing to remember is that, Michael Bradley's not going to become a bad player overnight because he goes to MLS. He's the same player. And you have to wonder what makes more sense? Do you want a guy that's playing bit minutes at Roma, not playing regularly, or do you want a guy playing 90 minutes week in, week out, heading into the World Cup? And when you look at it that way, maybe the preference is to have him playing week in and week out, even if it's not at the level of Serie A. And we all know MLS isn't at that level, and there's that's obvious. But maybe it makes more sense to have a guy that's match fit heading into the World Cup, regardless of the league he's playing in. So again, it'll be interesting to see and hear what Jurgen has to say about it. But as a general rule, he wants his players playing at the highest level they possibly can play at. And Bradley will not be playing against, the Inter Milans, the Juventuses of the world, and MLS. That's just a fact of life. So
he wasn't generally playing against the Juves of the world anyway.
No. But I'll tell you what, Jason, it's interesting because now you look back and watching. There's been comments about how much playing time Michael Bradley got at Roma this year. Only a handful of starts. I think he's made 5 starts. The thing to remember, what people forget is that he was injured for a month earlier in the season. And during that time, Roma went on this incredible run where they're winning every game that they're playing. So, that put him behind the 8 ball a little bit. Out of the games he's been available for, he's played in the only one he didn't play in either as a starter or as a substitute before this weekend's game against Juventus. And now that we know what we know, maybe the reason he didn't get on the field against Juventus is because this transfer was in the works.
Right.
I mean, we know that, it's happened before. It happens all the time. It's just smart business sense. You don't want to put a guy out. He rolls an ankle and the deal is down the toilet. So, but before that, every game except the very first game that he was on the bench after he came back from injury, he played in. So, Rudy Garcia likes him. He played him. He got him on the field. He was an important player. He had started 2 games in a row before not getting on the field against Juventus. So, but again, there's no question that he's going to be a guaranteed 90-minute starter every week in Toronto. And, heading into the World Cup, maybe that makes more sense.
Let me ask you if this should be filed under wishful thinking, or if I'm on to something just a little bit here. Yes, okay, he's not going to be up against the stiff competition, as competition as he would be in Serie A. But shouldn't his role in Toronto, and the season doesn't start until March, so there's that to consider. But isn't his role in Toronto going to be something different than what he was doing at Roma, what Rudy Garcia was asking him to do? Shouldn't he be a more expansive role? And isn't there a possibility that may prepare him for the World Cup, certainly in his responsibilities, more than what he was doing at Roma? Yeah,
I mean, possibly. And you have to. My first thought was he might find himself in a more advanced role at Toronto FC. I mean, you're not going to spend that kind of money, and we've seen him with the U.S. national team. He's a guy that can make plays when he gets the chance. His final ball is very good these days. It is, and certainly if you have Jermaine Defoe running onto some of those through balls that Michael can slip in, that's going to be really interesting to watch. So you could see that he'll have more offensive attacking responsibilities with Toronto than he would at Roma, which has guys like Totti and some of the other world class players that they have. But Michael Bradley is such a smart player. He's a smart person, first of all, but such a smart player, extremely adaptable. I'm not sure that it matters much where he plays for Toronto and if it changes anything significantly in terms of where and how he plays for the U.S. team. I don't expect that part of it to change too much. But if there's any player in the U.S. pool that can be adaptable, you have to think it's Michael Bradley.
The X factor in getting this done, and all the reports are now that it happened very, very quickly in the span of either 24 or 48 hours, depending on whose report you see, is Tim Vickery. He came into this job, and we knew he was going to change TFC. It had obviously made such an impact with the Galaxy on the soccer front. Now he's at MLSE, and while soccer is not his only responsibility, we knew he would make an impact. How do we sort of, because in November, Tim Vickery says we're going to make the biggest signing in MLS history.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of scoffed. He said it. Yeah. He said they would get it done in a month. Now, they didn't do that, but at this point, he kind of was right. I mean, he was right. This might be the biggest signing in MLS history.
In terms of a player coming over in his prime for a big transfer fee, I think this trumps Clint Dempsey. Now, listen, nothing's gonna surpass bringing David Beckham over at 31 years old. Just in terms of the global profile that he had. That frankly, I'm not sure there's another soccer player even now. I'm not even sure Leo Messi moves the needle the way David Beckham does in terms of the off the field component that he brings. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us thought, well, listen, Jermaine Defoe is, with all respect, is not going to be a bigger signing than David Beckham. But, with the two of them, with Defoe and Bradley combined, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that Bradley's the biggest signing in MLS history, but man, you can make the argument that on the field, it's the most significant move in MLS history. So I think, I don't think too many people that follow the American game closely doubted Tim Vickery that much. I think we scoffed a little bit, but we also said, he's got a track record. Let's see what happens.
Right.
And man, if he can put a winner on the field in Toronto after what that club's been through, and with Defoe and Bradley, I mean, that's a game changer. That changes that team significantly. Those are two of the biggest signings in league history, without a doubt. So you have to give it to him. And everything that man touches seems to turn to gold. And you have to expect that he's going to get it right in Toronto, and maybe not immediately. Last season, I think there was a lot of things he had to learn. But this season, I mean, heck, you have to think they make the playoffs, and they could well be a contender this year if all these moves come to pass. And I don't think we would have been saying that even a couple months ago in Toronto.
No, and one of the things that worries some American fans, some national team fans, is going to that place and that team and everything that they've been over the last as 8 years, which hasn't been very good. And Ryan Nelson is sort of a question. I mean, he goes through a very rocky first season, and Lewicki keeps him around. Why? I'm not sure. I mean, clearly he sees some potential there. Is Ryan Nelson good enough is he a good enough coach to make that team, play decent soccer and not ruin Michael Bradley from the fan perspective?
I don't think he's going to ruin Michael Bradley no matter what. I don't think a coach is going to come in and ruin Michael Bradley again and change him as a player. In my opinion, what Toronto needs more than anything is stability. So Ryan Nelson, the way he came over last year was very odd, very strange. He was an active player at the time. They didn't know if he was going to be there to start the season. Obviously Kevin Payne spearheaded that move. He's no longer there. But they need stability. I think Ryan Nelson, from talking to people that know him in MLS, that played with him at DC United, they only have great things to say about him in terms of he's a winner, he's a character guy, he has all the attributes that you'd think would make a good MLS coach. Mm-hmm. So I think getting rid of him after a year on the job probably doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm of the opinion that you have to give a guy 2-3 years, 3 years ideally, to see what he can do in this league. So it looks like he's going to get some resources, and we'll see how he does this year. But if Toronto FC does not make the playoffs for an 8th consecutive year, no way Ryan Nelson is around next year. But yeah, I think he can do a fine job. And the biggest problem there has been lack of stability and lack of talent and lack of a good supporting cast. And I think for the first time they're going to get that as well. They've made some smart hires, and it looks like they're going to have a chance this year to be something other than they've been for the first 7 seasons of their existence, which is the worst team in MLS history.
Yeah. No more excuses. There's no excuses for Ryan Nelson in 2014. He with the signings that Lewicki has given him. I mean, yes, there's some work to do at the back, and this is only a couple of pieces, but he should be able to make a competent, competitive MLS team out of this group. That's Doug McIntyre. Douglas McIntyre. There you go. Doug Mac, ESPN on Twitter. ESPN FC, right? Thank you very, very much for your time, Doug. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, my pleasure, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to grab Tim Vickery from down in Brazil. We'll talk some Brazilian preparations for the 2014 World Cup. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV with Jason Davis.
All right, it's always a thrill to have Tim Vickery from the BBC, South American football expert, on the line. Hi, Tim. How are you?
I'm very well. I've just seen on a tweet that you've put out that you've got a great show on TAP. Well, TAP is the Portuguese airline. Are we broadcasting to a Portuguese airline? I'm thrilled.
I don't believe that that's the case. I believe,
what a shame.
A figure of speech. I believe not chosen by me. I'm not sure I tweeted that. They may have been tweeted by my producer. We'll have a discussion later. Tim, it's been a little while since we spoke to you here, and I hate having guests on in negative circumstances. And I'm not saying that things are bad in Brazil, but we are going to be talking about Sepp Blatter criticizing Brazilian preparations for the 2014 World Cup, which is, imminent. It is almost upon us. Sepp seems incapable of understanding exactly what FIFA's role is in all of this. What was the response to what Sepp said as to Brazil having 7 years and just understanding how to throw a World Cup?
Well, to probably rephrase your initial premise, I don't think you're coming to me in negative circumstances. It's more like you're coming to me in fascinating circumstances.
Okay, sure. There we go.
And this certainly looks like, even more so off the pitch than on it, being an absolutely fascinating, engrossing year in Brazil's history. Putting aside for 1 minute the FIFA question, and the relationship between FIFA and the host country of a World Cup, which is in itself hugely controversial. To be honest, Blatter's comments bent over backwards be too fair to Brazil.
Okay. Because
the idea that Brazil had 7 years to prepare is false. Brazil had 11 years to prepare. We're backdating it now to 2007. Blatter was backdating it with 7 years. He's backdating it to 2007, when the envelope was revealed and the name Brazil came out of that envelope.
Right.
Jason, were you surprised that the name Brazil came out of that envelope?
Considering the rotation policy and the fact that Brazil was was the only South American bidder? No, of course not.
Exactly. It was the only candidate.
Yes.
So what happened in 2007 merely rubber-stamped what had been known since March 2003. In March 2003, FIFA announced that because of the rotation principle, which has now been put to bed largely, I think, because of events in Brazil, that 2014 would be South America's turn. And within days, CONMEBOL, the South American Confederation, announced that Brazil was its only candidate. Now, Colombia later ran a separate bid. It broke ranks and ran a separate bid, short-lived, and with no serious aspirations there. What Colombia was actually doing was competing against Venezuela, its neighbour and rival, for the opportunity to stage the World Youth Cup in 2011, which it did. So effectively, Brazil knew it would be staging the World Cup in March 2003. So you would think that when that name Brazil came out of the envelope, they would have had their plans in place. And after all, they had 4.5 years to do so. They would have chosen their host cities. They would have had their organising committee up and running with full government involvement therein. They would have had a full and complete debate inside the country, a realistic debate about how much this was going to cost and what the country was going to get out of it. None of this had happened. Let me repeat that. None of this had happened. None whatsoever. All the Brazilian people had heard was lies. They were told that all of the money to be spent on stadiums would be private money, and the public money would be reserved for infrastructure projects, which the country so badly needs, especially in terms of urban mobility. Now, once you get behind the clock, and Brazil was behind the clock right from day one, because, as I said, when the name Brazil came out of the envelope, they hadn't done any planning whatsoever. Deplorable. Absolutely deplorable. This has nothing to do with FIFA. That's another debate.
It's true.
This is the incompetence and the arrogance of the Brazilian state. And the Brazilian people, Brazilian society, last year gave very impressive signs of being absolutely sick to death of it. Because we saw that protest movement. There is nowhere in the world, I think, where the World Cup means as much to a society as it does to Brazil. But there is nowhere in the world where the society are likely to protest about the World Cup as much as Brazilians are likely to protest about it this year. So something has gone badly wrong. Yes, there are certainly huge problems with the way that FIFA is administrated and the relationship between FIFA and the host country. But in this particular issue, we are talking about a Brazilian dynamic, because once they got behind the clock, this had two huge consequences. It means that the price of what you can do goes up because you're rushing. And that's a price which is now not only expressed in terms of money, it's also expressed in terms of human lives. A few workers now have died in the construction of the stadiums, and the last one who died specifically on construction in Manaus, he fell from a height of some 30 meters about 4 o'clock in the morning in the hours of darkness.
Yeah.
Now, that's a consequence of being behind the clock. And since then, workers have been prevented on health and safety grounds from working at that height in the hours of darkness. So the price of what you can do goes up, and the scope of what you can do goes down. Where can you cut corners in order to stage a World Cup? Urban transport. That's where you can cut corners. Strictly speaking, for a World Cup, you don't necessarily need underground systems. The World Cup is so special that people will go to the stadium by hook or by crook 4 hours before the game to be part of the event. So that's where they have cut corners, and it's led to a widespread sense in the country that Brazilian society is paying too much for this and not getting enough back in return. And there was so much time to ensure that was not the case, and that really is the tragedy of the thing.
It's fascinating, and that's the right word, because this World Cup, and again, from a removed perspective, has the potential to both be an amazing, thrilling, I mean, not just on the field, but certainly the spectacle that the Brazilian people are capable of, and also one of the most troubling to this point because of, as you said, the Brazilian people made it very clear at the Confederations Cup, their frustrations, and there's no reason to think it won't happen again. I just, at this point, and I know Dilma Rousseff responded to Sepp Blatter and gave her, sort of uplifting message that it will be the Cup of Cups. Where is the line? And honestly, from your perspective, is it better for the rest of the world watching from afar to pay attention to the social aspects of this, the social ramifications of this, or should we be enjoying the football as we would in any other World Cup?
Well, I felt during the Confederations Cup I was living in journalistic heaven. You didn't know where to look. On the field, it was, I think, by far the best Confederations Cup that we've had. In fact, the TV audiences around the world would seem to reinforce that fact. And off the field, it was just absolutely fascinating watching a country change in front of your eyes. The Brazil of May 2013 ain't coming back. Where we're going to go, I'm not entirely sure. There will be demonstrations during the World Cup. I've absolutely no doubt about it. How numerous they'll be, how vociferous they'll be, that I think is very, very hard to predict. I think it's almost like a weather forecast. You put all the factors and you try and judge, but you don't know until it happens how those factors will relate with each other and what the final outcome will be. Talking about the response that Dilma Rousseff made. One thing that she mentioned is the trust that the rest of the world is placing in Brazil, as seen by the record ticket sales. And this is an important point because FIFA's ticket selling partner, Match, actually lost money in South Africa. And the South Africa World Cup was perhaps a little bit unfortunate from a sales point of view in coming hard on the heels of the credit crunch where there was less money around and so on. And I'm told that in terms of corporate hospitality packages, they sold 49,000 for that World Cup. Well, for the Brazil World Cup, they're well over 250,000, and they're hoping to sell 400,000. Ticket sales record. They should have no problem whatsoever filling the stadiums. And as one insider told me, that's why people understand that FIFA have been pretty patient with Brazil. Frankly, the odd not so diplomatic comments, like the comments that Blatter made to a Swiss newspaper, I think. But in general, FIFA have been fairly tolerant because deadlines and promises have been made and then never kept. But from a strictly financial point of view, and that's clearly the way that FIFA operates.
Yes.
Not only are they guaranteed that money from the sale of the TV rights, but they're also, the event is paying for itself in terms of ticket sales and corporate hospitality. So it's a very tense relationship between FIFA and Brazil. But the thing that's keeping that tension manageable and ensuring that the show goes ahead is the fact that it's going to be a lucrative World Cup.
Doesn't that only heighten the reasons or increase the reason for those who would like to use the World Cup as a stage to again shine the light on some of the social injustice in Brazil? More reason to be vociferous and I suppose and again, making no assumptions, but I think it's something you have to consider whether or not the type of protest or the manner in which the Brazilian people protest might change for the worse?
Yeah, I mean, the first point there, and that the fact that the stadiums have turned out to be so impressive, if anything, has been an own goal in terms of PR of the Brazilian government. When we look back at the kind of provisions we were making back in 2007, I don't think anyone really expected the stadiums to turn out quite as impressive as some of them have, and especially the one in Salvador in Bahia, Fonte Nova. It's a glorious stadium, wonderful stadium. But the fact that these stadiums are so impressive just makes the contrast all the more glaring between the stadiums that the Brazilian state has been able to organise and its lack of provision in so many other areas. And that wonderful phrase that caught on during the protest movement in June and July, FIFA standard. If we can have FIFA standard stadiums, why on earth can't we have FIFA standard health, FIFA standard education, FIFA standard public transport, FIFA standard social services? Go on, Jason.
No, I'm sorry. You dropped out for a second there. I did not interrupt you. Go ahead, Tim.
Right, and the second point, the manner of protest. Well, this is, I think, a little bit up in the air because exactly how this is going to play out, and no one foresaw the protest movement in June and July. No one, even the original organisers, had absolutely no idea it was going to catch on to the extent that it did. So what happens during the World Cup now? And firstly, there are so many different factors here. And firstly, there's the fact that the World Cup is so important to Brazil, and the Confederations Cup is nothing more really than a warm-up. Does this mean that that many people will be more reluctant to protest during the World Cup than they were during Confederations Cup? That's one possibility. Also, the dynamic of protest, the activities of the radical groups known as the Black Blocs, perhaps with agents provocateurs in there, has that alienated some of the more mainstream protesters? Okay. With absolutely no idea how these things are going to play out, and and throw in the fact as well that this is election year in Brazil. So someone somewhere is going to be looking to make political capital out of this discontent. You throw all of these into your mixer, and then you turn the mixer on, and then you step back to see what the blend is going to be. And I honestly, at the moment, I have no idea, and I don't really think anyone does.
It seems appropriate considering the uncertainty over, obviously Brazil being at home and the Confederations Cup victory that makes them the obvious favorite. Everyone will be choosing, picking Brazil to win this tournament. But this is a very even tournament in a lot of other ways. A very unpredictable tournament on the field, and we now have the last year or so has brought up the possibility it's going to be a very, very unpredictable tournament off the field as well. And I can't help but wonder, whether or not FIFA is going to be treated like an invading army when they show up to run what is the world's biggest sporting event.
Yeah, I mean, so far, it's been the dynamic has been more of the people against their own state than necessarily against FIFA.
Okay.
But that could change, and that's something that certainly FIFA were very worried about. And we now know that during the Confederations Cup, there was a moment when FIFA seriously considered suspending the tournament. So this clearly is a worry for FIFA. But something, as I say, I'm not sure this was always fully understood by many abroad, especially lots of people who have an anti-FIFA agenda, and that's quite understandable. But the primary target was the Brazilian people against the Brazilian state, the way they're treated. Not even necessarily the Brazilian government It was the Brazilian state. It was such a wide-ranging thing, and FIFA was a secondary target.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it was certainly societal issues on top of government policies creating some of the upset, and FIFA being enabled by the Brazilian government in order to come in. And again, I think we can all we can safely assume that, generally speaking, the passionate football fans of Brazil want to put this tournament on and want to show well for the rest of the world. Tim, let me kind of do a quick left turn here before I let you go, and I apologize for a very general question, but we're focused very much on the World Cup and on the international game and what the Brazilian national team will do at this tournament. How is the health of the Brazilian game domestically?
Pretty poor, frankly, and pretty poor. We had, in financial terms, we had a boom with rising TV money, and for a while the clubs were spending money. Now you can see it very, very clearly at the start of this year. They're drastically cutting costs, So there's that aspect, but also, more than anything, I think that there's the organisational aspect, where and it's been a fascinating year with that as well. And one thing which hampers the Brazilian game so much is the calendar. And this will get a little bit technical, so I'll try and explain this in layman's terms. And the main problem here, the main obstacle, is, and Brazil is a huge country, so it's difficult to organise a calendar for football in such a huge country. It's difficult, it's a real challenge. And because of its size, there wasn't a really genuinely regular-based national championship until 1971. So the history of Brazilian football is based on rivalry inside cities. Brazil is currently divided into 27 states. And at the moment, as it stands, before the national championship is played, each of these 27 states have their own championship. Now, these tournaments were extremely important for the development of Brazilian football. These state championships. Let's find out who the champion of Rio and who the champion of São Paulo and who the champion of Minas Gerais, of the city of Belo Horizonte is, and so on. These days, though, those championships have totally outlived their usefulness. Totally outlived their usefulness. I mean, they are. It's probably the only place in the world where huge teams who can count their supporters in tens of millions play on a league basis, not on a cup basis, play on a league basis. Teams so small that they could get their supporters to the game in one truck, probably carrying some freight as well. So the existence of these state championships is a disaster for the big clubs, and the big clubs don't make any money out of it at all. It prevents really the big clubs from competing because the competition is now global. You know, if you're Flamengo in Rio, if you're Corinthians in São Paulo, you're competing with players. Not just against local teams, you're competing with players against Barcelona and Milan and Manchester United and so on. And they don't have to waste part of the year playing tiny little teams on a league basis. So the state championships are a huge problem. They force Brazil's calendar out of kilter with the rest of the world, which means the Brazilian league, there simply isn't space for it to respect FIFA dates. So when the national team plays, that means that the Brazilian clubs are having to lose their best players who are going to the national team. It's an extraordinary situation that no big European club would contemplate. You know, paying your players a fortune and then watching them miss 2 weeks of action because they're off playing friendlies for the national team. And you'd expect the clubs to not to want to play these championships anymore. And these championships are still important politically because inside Brazil's Football Association, the CBF, the balance of power is not with the clubs. The balance of power, because Brazil is a federal country, is with the presidents of the 27 state federations. And it's in their vested interests to retain these state championships. If they don't retain their own championship, what on earth is it? That they just become a purely useless level of bureaucracy. Right. So the astonishing thing is that the clubs themselves don't seem to position themselves. And if I can just give an example, Flamengo of Rio, giant club, towards the end of last year, they played the final of the Brazilian Cup. And they put, for non-members, they put the prices of the tickets astronomically high. It was a big game. They could fill the stadium charging what they like. And their justification was, well, we have to do this because in the first part of next year, because of the state championships, we don't make any money. So the obvious question is, what on earth are you doing playing the state championship? Why do you accept this? But the clubs do meekly accept it. And now, though, the players are not. And there's been a movement. It's a kind of echo of the protest movement that we saw in the streets in June and July. A movement of the players themselves, organised by senior professionals who are coming towards the end of their career and don't have too much to lose by raising their heads above the parapet. A movement which is called, the translation would be common sense, in favour of a better football for everyone. And this movement is pushing for a better calendar for Brazilian football, one in which the Brazilian national championship receives its proper value. So far, these players are just getting a high hat from Brazil's FA, the CBF, and it's entirely likely that we're going to get a players' strike in the next few months, which just a few months ago would have been unthinkable. And Brazil's players going on strike, unthinkable. It happens elsewhere in the continent. Argentine players have a huge history of strikes, but Brazilian players going on strike, unthinkable. It's no longer unthinkable. It's yet more evidence of a country changing in front of our eyes. And it's the same theme, really, of the protests in June and July. It's a new Brazil now led by these players who have European experience, who've seen better organised football and want to bring it back here. It's a new Brazil clashing with the old Brazil of the inept whiskey-sodden oligarchy. And it's yet another chapter in what is going to be a fascinating book that we're all going to have the pleasure of reading while it happens, which is which way Brazil goes in 2014.
Yeah, you see, I mean, these things happen around the world. I mean, this kind of pseudo-revolution, whatever label you want to put on it. I mean, it's not to that level yet, but it's certainly, there's certainly unrest and upset and people want change. This happens all the time. It doesn't always happen with the microscope of the world's biggest sporting event happening right around the same time. Tim Vickery from the BBC, the South American soccer expert. We love to get on the air. Thank you very much for your time, Tim. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We'll let Tim go. Fascinating stuff as always with Tim. I love having Tim Vickery on the air. Not only is Tim Vickery so knowledgeable and just so well spoken with, he explains everything in such easy terms for the rest of us to understand who are not familiar with the intricacies of Brazilian football. He makes my job easy. I just say, hey, Tim, what's going on with this thing? And I sit back and I listen like the rest of you. I'm just a listener at that point. I'm listening to Tim Vickery. That was the Tim Vickery show. That wasn't Soccer Morning. Well, it was Soccer Morning bringing you Tim Vickery, which is why you need to go to soccermorning.com and help support the show. Yeah, do that right there. All right. At this point, I think, with the Brazilian situation, the way that it exists right now, it's sort of in this, at least for the rest of the world. Again, on the ground in Brazil, things are happening. He mentioned the player movement, Bom Senso FC, the name applied to the player movement. The rest of the world sort of is we're going about our business, getting prepared. If you're planning on going, you're getting your last minute travel arrangements done. You've probably already done that. You're getting your visa. You're getting set to go to Brazil. Or if you intend to stay home and watch it on television, you're anxiously watching the preparations of your national team. And in the United States, we have Camp Cupcake, which is the traditional name for the January camp, which is taking on a different look in 2014. It's got a much harder edge about it. Even though there are some new faces in the bunch that Jurgen Klinsmann has called up, there's a sense that there are legitimate ways for some of these guys to play their way into the World Cup team. At the same time that we're just going about our business, getting ready for the World Cup, Brazil is still sort of bubbling. We know that the stadiums that were ceremonially delivered on the new year aren't done. 6 of them are still in the works. Again, fascinating to see Sepp Blatter and Tim Vickery put some context on it, criticize Brazil. Well, Brazil says we'll be fine, or at least the president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, says we'll be fine. it's such an interesting thing to see. And yet here we are. Okay, this is 2014. That's the next World Cup. We should certainly be focused on it. We have, and we continually have Qatar in our minds because of the situation there with the kafala system and the ridiculous possibility of moving the World Cup from the summer to the winter because it's so dang hot. All of that is, what happened to Russia? Are we going to talk about Russia at all? I mean, look, I know 4 years from now, Russia is still 4 years from now, but it's the next one. After Brazil, it's the next one. And the Olympics are going to Russia in a month. Less than a month. When do the Olympics start? February something. The Winter Olympics in Sochi. We're going to get a nice little picture of what might be possible. Now, I think the Olympics are clearly a different thing. The average Winter Olympic fan who goes to the event and watches the guys bobsled and luge and whatever, and they don't have the same proclivities as soccer fans. And soccer fans in Russia have a terrible reputation. So I'm interested to see what talking points about World Cup 2018 come out of these Winter Olympics, if any. And if some of the spotlight shifts a bit to Russia. Some people are talking about it. I don't want to make it sound like no one is concerned what Russia is going to do in 2018 or how Russia is going to be. Whether the racism that is so rampant in Russia is going to be a significant problem, not just for the players, but for anybody who wants to travel to support their team. I mean, that's the thing you cannot have. Now, in Brazil, there may be protests. I think for the most part, what we saw at the Confederations Cup, and that's the evidence we have to go on, the Brazilian people are not going. They're not upset about. They're not upset about people coming to their country to celebrate football. Although there's some campaigns to get people to stay away. I think for the most part, the traveling fans will be fine. But what happens in Russia when a nation's fans go to travel to follow their team, and there are serious issues and reports that, just getting on the train can be a problem if you're not the right color. I mean, this is not a little bit of a problem. And again, I mentioned Sochi. I have even mentioned the gay the homosexual propaganda laws, which are absolutely insane, which are, as far as I know, still unresolved. We're going to the United States is going to send a representative contingent, a presidential contingent featuring several prominent homosexuals as sort of an FU to Russia. What happens in 4 years when it's not just, it's not just the Winter Olympics that are kind of an interesting thing to see every now and then. It's the world's game, the biggest sport as played in the world. It seems like we are skipping over Russia. It seems like we are leaving Russia to the side, that we're giving the authorities there a pass for the time being. And I get that the Qatari World Cup strikes a different chord because it's such a small country, because it's in the middle of the desert, because it's 120 degrees during the day in the summer, because they intend to build air-conditioned stadiums and giant stadiums that resemble boats and or female genitalia. I get that that's more fascinating because it is it's so far out of whack with what we expect for a World Cup. But Russia is getting a free pass in terms of the attention, in terms of questions over what they're going to bring to the tournament. Brazil, we can understand what the Brazilian people are going through as soccer fans, as the world soccer fans. We can look and see, all right, look, the Brazilian people are upset. They have a right to be upset. That's cool. Go do your thing. Obviously don't hurt anybody, but go do your thing. We get it. You have that right as free individuals. In Russia, we're talking about governmental issues. And the same goes for Qatar, but we're talking about the government putting in place laws that are discriminatory, that affect human rights. How are we going to do with that? I don't know. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll reset. We'll open the phone lines. We'll talk more Michael Bradley if you want. We'll certainly talk about Ian Darke being named lead voice for ESPN for the World Cup. Kyle Hines Rummenigge in the news. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN and Kick TV. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
30 minutes to go on a Thursday edition of Soccer Morning on the North American Soccer Network. Find us on YouTube, youtube.com/NASN TV. That's the channel you need to bookmark. That's where you need to go to watch the show live each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Pacific. My brain really just almost screwed that up. That's where we are. If you're enjoying the show, please check out soccermorning.com, which will redirect you to our Indiegogo campaign, where we're raising some money to help us get going for 2014. Help us charge into 2014 so we can do stuff like get Tim Vickery on the line to talk about Brazilian preparation for the 2014 World Cup. That was a little loud. So we can talk about Russia. So we can talk about Qatar. So we can talk about Michael Bradley and what it means for MLS. What does this mean? Big picture, guys. What does this mean for MLS? Look, I'm sometimes those narratives, the big picture narratives, what does it mean? Sometimes those are forced. Sometimes those are ridiculous. Sometimes a thing happening is just a thing happening. It doesn't have any wider ramifications. But when we're talking about a 26-year-old U.S. international, automatic starter, we'll see what Jurgen Klinsmann thinks, but come on, automatic starter, decides he's going to leave the second-place club in one of the top 5 leagues in the world, whatever his playing time, to come to MLS and join Toronto FC. It means something. We don't have all of the details yet. We don't know exactly how much he's making. We don't know exactly what the transfer fee is. We don't know exactly why he decided to do this. But it does mean something. And I think the examination over the course of the next couple of weeks and once Michael Bradley steps on the field will be fascinating. Once we hear from Michael Bradley, you got to say something, Mike. You got to explain this. I mean, does he owe that to us? It's pretty standard stuff. You make a move, you talk about why. Clint Dempsey did it. Clint Dempsey's not the most enthusiastic interview ever, but he did it. All right. To shift gears just a little bit, I did mention as going into that break, Ian Darke named lead voice for the ESPN for ESPN's coverage of the 2014 World Cup. This pushes Martin Tyler to the side or out the door. I mean, Martin Tyler's going to work. It's not like Martin Tyler's not going to work, but it does mean that Ian Darke takes over that lead role for Martin Tyler. And look, lots of people love Ian Darke. I have no particular feelings either way. I mean, I enjoy him. He's very good at his job. I'm not in the thrall of Ian Darke. I thought his calls for the Algeria goal was fine, and the Wombat goal was a better call. We have a phone call. Who's this?
Hey, it's Justin from BC.
What's up, Justin?
Just calling about the Bob Bradley trade and speculation and all that stuff.
The Bob Bradley trade. Did Bob Bradley?
No, sorry. Oh, sorry, my bad. It's early here still, just waking up.
Oh, okay.
Just catching the show. I'm not sure if it was covered at all or if anybody had discussed exactly how the Toronto fans are going to see this. Like, is it going to move the needle on attendance at all for people that are going there? Like, I mean, for people like us that live in the soccer bubble, this is huge. And,
right.
You know, I'm a lot like my man Vince over in Toronto there. You know, I've sort of adopted the U.S. national team as one of my teams that I support because I'm such a fan of MLS and I want to see them, succeed. So as the casual fan, is anybody going to really get excited about this move at all?
You know, I think it's a cumulative effect, right? I mean, the fact that TFC is making moves that are obviously intended to improve the team significantly, not a little bit, not like rebuilding. Let's go find a 23-year-old you never heard of, and maybe we'll bring a kid up from the academy and get him some minutes. It's not this slow thing. I mean, there are questions whether or not you can do this in one fell swoop, but we've seen it before. We've seen teams go from out of the playoffs or last place to making the playoffs. It's Michael Bradley. It's Jermaine Defoe. That right there is, I think, enough to get people who may have said, I'm done with TFC to pay attention again. And, that's the first step to getting them to buy tickets again. Right?
Definitely. I agree. I'm on the same page as you. It gets me excited. And, as a Whitecap supporter, it sort of pains me to see Toronto doing well. But let
me ask you a question about that.
As a league, it's really great to see.
Let me ask you a question about that, actually, because this has been, while TFC is making headlines with two massive signings, it's been a rough couple of weeks for the Vancouver Whitecaps, and the Camilo thing is so potentially disruptive, not just to the Whitecaps, but potentially to MLS. What do you make of what your club has done to this point? And does what Toronto is doing affect how you feel about Vancouver? I know the only commonality is that they're both Canadian clubs, but I wonder if there's some of that.
I'm not very pleased with what's going on. Like I said, I called early in the week, and there's just no transparency at all in this league. The Whitecaps haven't done very much. MLS hasn't done very much to sort of step up. I don't know where Camilo is. I don't know what's going on with any of that. And the fact that we can't seem to get our house in order really sort of fires me up. And to see Toronto do well, it makes me happy, because I don't like to see any team in this league struggle at all. But when it happens to my team and I see them not doing well, it bothers me. But I can't really say too much more than that. I don't know what they're doing, and it's very frustrating as a fan and as a supporter. But there's bright days ahead, I'm sure.
I just, again, it's a very interesting time to sort of watch MLS change what it is in a lot of ways. And again, while we have the positives of what Toronto's doing and what that might mean for MLS, there might be some negatives coming out of the Camilo situation in Vancouver. I appreciate the call, man. Thanks for the support.
Right on. Thanks a lot.
All right. By the way, phone number is 347-756-6276 if you want to give me a call. If you want to excuse me, if you want to give me grief for saying that Ian Darke's call of the Algeria goal was just fine, I undersold it. I enjoyed it, of course. The goal. All right. I don't have to defend myself on this, do I? Do I? Really? I guess, look, it's an iconic call in American soccer history because of the goal. I think it was a good call. How about that? It was a good call. But I'm not going to be, I'm going to separate the goal and what it meant for my team from the call. One of the best goal calls ever, says James. It was funny how you deadpanned on it there. I like Ian Darke. I thought it was a fine, good, if you want to go that far, goal call. I don't think it was one of the best goal calls ever. 313, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, it's Isaac in Pittsburgh.
Hey, Isaac, what's up, man?
Hey, well, listen, if I was Michael Bradley or like any other Yank abroad coming back to MLS, and I think a lot of this criticism that returning to my domestic league is going to hurt my performance, that'd be like insulting to my intelligence, because the way I see it, essentially what these critics are saying is that the American soccer player is so oafish, I guess, that spending 6 months or a year in MLS, a growing league, a respectable league, before the World Cup, is going to erase all the valuable lessons I've learned from playing in one of Europe's top leagues, or one or two.
Sure.
I think that notion is ridiculous. And if any American player is smart enough to know what he needs to do to get ready for a major international competition, it's Michael Bradley. Whether that's loads of playing time, which he's almost guaranteed to get in Toronto, or a massive paycheck.
No, I'm with you on that, and I wonder, I don't think Michael Bradley took the fan perspective into account whatsoever when he made this decision, right? There's or the pundit opinion, or whoever is talking and making noise, whether it's on Twitter or the radio or online, in the newspapers. I don't think he cared about any of that when he made this decision, and that's the right attitude for him personally. Again, and I've said this over the past couple of days since the news broke. It's okay to question whether or not this will make Michael Bradley a better player. I don't think will hurt Michael Bradley as a player. I don't think anybody quite knows yet. It doesn't mean he's going to become a bad player, though. And I think that's the hyperbole that enters the discussion entirely too easily, as if leaving Roma and going to Toronto, which again is has been a bad club, but it's still a professional setup, and MLS is still a competent soccer league, no matter what you think of it. It's not going to turn him into a bad player. And I trust Michael Bradley 100%.
Yeah. I thanks for taking my call. I'm going to let you get back to Ian Dark.
I appreciate it, Isaac. No, I'm done with Ian Dark. I'm not taking the beating here. I'm not taking the criticism. I'm being criticized for having an opinion about Ian Dark's call. All right. All right. There's that. All right, let's shift to look, this is not new necessarily. I think this is the second or possibly even third time that this subject has come up in the German press. Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, chairman of the European Club Association. What is that thing called? Whatever it's called. It might be called that. The European Club Association might be called that. Chairman of that group, one of the top officials at Bayern Munich, has told France Football that shifting schedules away from games in winter to games in summer makes sense, and that FIFA and UEFA are seriously thinking about changing the European League calendar. This is one of those things that, because of the way we've been talking about the calendar shift in this country for MLS, what is the reasons for talking about a calendar shift? Why are we even considering it? Why would we even propose that American and Canadian soccer teams play at any point in a winter environment? Because it would line us up with a majority of the soccer playing world. It would mean transfer windows line up. It would mean that our international calendar would not be as disruptive because we're not playing through the summer. And then here comes Karl-Heinz Rummenigge saying, you know what? We might play. Summer might be better for us. Maybe we should shift to summer. You know, you can't win for trying. Erica 301. Who's this?
Hey, Jason. This is Pablo from DC.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, I hope you guys need your target. Just give some money to your show. You guys doing an awesome job. So thanks for that.
I appreciate that, man. Thanks a lot.
Hey, I just want to say, I know you've been talking about this. I stopped watching your show a couple of minutes ago, so I don't know if you talked about it again, but I am so angry at Michael Bradley right now.
Wow. Okay.
So angry.
Go ahead.
He, for me, was the best technical player that we have, and with Dempsey coming back, he was a player for me waving the American flag in Europe of us being able to produce great talent and here. And I'm going back to Toronto, number one. I know the argument is that he's going to get playing time, but I find the argument really kind of stupid because, okay, you're going to want to get playing time, but you want to go to Toronto to play in a lower technical kind of league. It just, for me, it makes no sense.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from, but all of that kind of makes some assumptions, and you're first of all, you're assuming that Michael Bradley becomes a worse technical player because he's playing in a lesser technical league. Is that necessarily true?
Yeah, I agree with you, but at the same time, you become a better player when you're training with the best players out there and the best teams.
Sure. No, look, I think that there's certainly one line of thinking that in order to be the best, you need to be surrounded by the best. I get that. Yeah, go ahead.
And okay, so the point is, you want to get playing time. Why not move to a smaller team in England, the Premier League, and Italy, Netherlands, like those, even though, they're not going to be playing at the level or training at the level that he was doing at Roma, I still think that the level of technical level in those countries is higher than the MLS. Unfortunately, I'm a big MLS fan, but it's not. So it boils down for me to the money. Most, even though they usually don't reference that when the players not reverse the importance of money, but it just. Anyway.
Well, no, Pablo. Look, I mean, I think that fans are extremely critical of players when it seems clear that they are making moves for money. Now, in this situation, it's not like if Michael Bradley was going and playing in the UAE for $6 million a year, then I think that would be more valid. He's getting paid. Yes, money is a factor, but he's also coming back to the league where he got his start. He's going to be much, much closer to home at TFC. I'm assuming that TFC was the only MLS team willing to step up with this money. Otherwise, he might have ended up somewhere else. He sees what they're doing with Jermaine Defoe. He may have some familiarity, understanding of what Ryan Nelson is all about. He certainly knows what Tim Lewicki can do with the hammer of big money. So I think that there's some other things here. Again, to say Michael Bradley not playing in a top technical league is troubling is not unfair. I get that. I still think that ultimately he'll be fine. And since he wasn't competing consistently at Roma, I know training matters too, but he wasn't consistently competing at Roma. I think it's difficult to know if it would have been better sticking there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that argument, it does, I understand. It's just for me, this timing, I agree with, for who mentioned Doug McIntyre, that Bradley's technical level is not going to decrease in the next 3-4 months before the World Cup. And I don't find that as an issue. I do want him to play. But my view is long term, and it's difficult to measure or to foresee what's going to happen in the long term. But
right.
With Donovan and Dempsey most likely not continuing with the national team after this World Cup because of their age.
Sure.
I saw Bradley as the natural leader to follow up and and be that phase of Americans in top division teams. And I just don't think that's going to happen unless I don't know anything about contract issues, but I don't know if he does a great World Cup, will he be able, if a big team's interested in buying him, can he go back to Europe? I don't know.
If a big team, thanks for the call, man. I gotta move on. If a big team buys it, I mean, if a big team comes in with an offer high enough for Toronto FC to want to sell him, and he's agreeable to the move, then that can still happen. I mean, any player can be sold at any time as long as both of the parties are on board with that. I think what I should have gotten to there with Pablo is a little bit more interesting is the flag bearing situation. We want that American guy to be in Europe, waving the American flag as, hey, I'm an American soccer player and I can get it done too. And that's part of the reason we're having this reaction. 956, you're on the air.
Yeah, this is Johnny Bravo.
What's up? Hey, Johnny Bravo. Been a long time, man. What's up?
I know it's been a long time, but it's been a long time coming. I mean, I have mixed feelings about Bradley to Toronto, if that sounds correct.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in that same camp, Johnny. Your mixed feelings are coming out slow. You need to pick up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, on one side, I understand, he's doing it for the money, that's good, you gotta feed your kids, gotta feed your family. But on the other side, you're not gonna progress a lot on MLS. I'm not sure as he would have progressed in Europe.
Okay. Let me say this, Johnny. Thanks for the call, man. I'm not sure that progression at 26 years old, the type of player Michael Bradley is. Look, I mean, I guess what you could say is he's the player he's going to be physically. Because at 26, you're not going to get any better physically. I mean, you're pretty much at your peak. His only direction now is probably downhill. Now, what could get better is his understanding of the game. He played in one of the most tactical leagues in the world for a couple of seasons now. Is he going to glean that much more sticking around in Italy? Now, I realize a lot of this is justification for him making the move, but the move is done. So why not look for the possible reasons that this isn't the disaster some people might think it is? Area code 562, you're on the air.
So Jason, this is Byron.
Hey, Byron, what's up, man?
About Bradley, I'm a little bit disappointed. I mean, I see this as Bradley taking a step back in his career. I mean, he's going to go from playing against Juventus and Milan to playing against Chivas and Columbus.
Okay.
That's a huge difference.
No, sure there is. Sure there is.
Yeah, that's why I see this as a step back. I mean, as a U.S. soccer fan, I like seeing our top players in top leagues.
Yeah,
representing us, and I don't know. I feel this is a step back.
Again, okay. Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate the call, Byron. Why are we concerned about? I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong to be concerned about what the rest of the world thinks or what Europe thinks of American players, but really, why are we concerned? And if the possibility exists for MLS, which is ultimately going to be the driver of American soccer's success and growth, if the possibility exists for them to get the best American player, shouldn't they be trying to get the best American player? Area code 401, you're on the air.
Hey, this is Clark from Providence.
What's up, Clark?
Hey, I just wanted to chip in with the Michael Bradley stuff.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, I totally see why he did it. I don't have any problem with the whole level thing, because in my mind, example 1A of kind of players can still keep at whatever level they're at. Look at Sasha Question, right, at Anderlecht. I mean, he's playing in the Champions League. Everybody loves the whole idea of really playing at the highest level. But I'm still picking Michael Bradley every day of the week over Sasha Question, right?
Yep.
And I mean, to me, it's a perception issue more than a talent issue. And
I agree with
people have every right to get worked up about that. But I'm happy with him coming. The only reason that I'm a little unsure about it is there's a part of me that really wants him to be in America.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. I am with you. I appreciate the call. Look, the perceptions are a major part of this. And again, it's not that we're wrong to question Michael Bradley. It's not that he's not taking a step back. I think it's pretty obvious that, at least in terms of the pedigree of the competition that he's involved in, he is taking a step back. It's just that I think it brings up some questions over why we care so much. And, Trevor here has got an opinion that more players succeeding in Europe opens up more opportunities for American players, which ideally could result in more player sales from MLS reinvesting that revenue. That is a practical reason for us to care about what Europe thinks. Selling players to Europe to make more money to invest in MLS. That I can be on board with. But if it's just a matter of, well, we want more Americans in Europe, I still don't understand why that's the case necessarily. And I've been that way too. I get excited when an American's playing in the Premier League or the Bundesliga, but I'm not sure why. Area code 951, who's this?
Hey man, I love your show. I watch it every day.
I appreciate that.
I don't understand why everybody's talking about progression. I mean, we see Len Donovan's been playing in MLS since he was, 15, 16 years old?
No, not that long.
Michael Bradley was born in MLS. The reason he's coming back to MLS might be for the money, but, I mean, like you said, he's the one player that all qualifying, he's been just top-notch. And for him to come back to MLS, it must mean that MLS is actually being and turning into a league that everybody wants to come and play, like Jermaine Defoe and other players like that. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I mean, look, let's take a look at some of the evidence. I think you bring up a good point. Michael Bradley's not coming to MLS if MLS is a joke. Okay, he's a smart soccer player. He knows the game. He understands. His dad is a coach. He played in Serie A. He's not going to join a league if it is a dog doo-doo league. Okay, that's just not going to happen. And I trust Michael Bradley's understanding of that better than my own, because he's playing the game every day on one of the highest, or he's training every day on one of the highest levels. He's played in some of the biggest games in Italy. The other thing is we have a preponderance of evidence just from recent moves. Again, you mentioned Donovan, been here forever. Okay, his reasoning slightly different, but he hasn't. It's not like he didn't reach his peak. Obafemi Martins took a flyer on this league, and I know that there's some questions about him, but he's still a player who was in demand. Clint Dempsey decided to come back. There are legitimate reasons to look at this league and say it is taking a step. Now, it's not going to be one big leap. It's not like MLS goes from a moderately good league to fantastically good league overnight. It's going to take some time. But unless you get players like Michael Bradley, it's not going to happen. So I'm fine with this from an MLS perspective. From the national team perspective, I think anything else, man?
Yeah, it's about the Galaxy, man, but would you be able to answer it?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's about the Galaxy.
Hey, ask me. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you.
All right. How would you feel if Marco Papa was playing the Galaxy?
I mean, I'm a little afraid of Marco Papa coming back. I mean, he was.
I'm Guatemalan, so I take that.
Well, okay, look, don't you think? And this is not. I didn't bring this up first. I mean, I think the guys at Pro Soccer Talk when I brought this up. Marco Papa wanted to get to Europe so badly when he was here, and he was a very, very good player in MLS. I would have taken Chicago Fire Marco Papa every day of the week. He worked really hard to get to Europe. Now he's coming back, and as we've seen with guys like Juan Toja, who didn't go to as good of a league as Marco Papa, it doesn't always work when you come back like that. I think Marco Papa's better than Juan Toja, but let's keep our expectations sort of reasonable when it comes to Papa, I think.
But he's got that Guatemalan flair.
Hey man, if you need that in your team, I'm not going to argue with it. I appreciate the call. Thanks a lot. All right, we've only got a couple of minutes here left in the Thursday show. I'm looking at some of these tweets. You guys are great. Dwayne DCAPODICE on Twitter. Stupid move for Bradley. Stupid move for MLS. Okay, there you go. The part that stings the most, why Canada? That's from Sam Stokes on Twitter. Mountie Bradley, hashtag Mountie Bradley. All right. Yeah, it's definitely a split. And again, I think I've struggled with it. I want to believe, I want to trust in Michael Bradley's understanding of the game. I want to trust that he knows he's not going to be a worse player on the other side of his MLS experience. And look, honestly, from a selfish perspective, a U.S. men's national team perspective, all I care about is that he's good in June and July. I don't really, it doesn't bother me if Michael Bradley comes to MLS and is bad for March and April and May. Now, I want him to be good because I want the best for him as a person. He's a good guy. He works really hard. But if I have no interest in Toronto FC winning games, it doesn't matter to me. If he's good in June and July, then what does it? This move is a nothing thing. I don't think making this decision in January is going to have such big ramifications for the World Cup in the summer. Now, after that, we can open up the conversation again. And as some people, I think people are holding out hope that Michael Bradley has a fantastic World Cup, gets into high demand, gets a big money move back to Europe. Okay, fine. You're allowed to hope for that. Again, ask yourself why it's necessary for MLS and for American soccer players to be validated by Europe, unless it's about transfers. Unless you believe that Europe thinks all the same way, and if they see one American player succeeding, they're going to go buy a bunch of American players from MLS. Maybe that's possible. All right, here we go. Soccermorning.com, which will redirect you to the Indiegogo campaign. We are in day 2. We have come flying out of the gates, and thank you so much to everybody who has already contributed. Fantastic perks. If you want to be DJ for a day on Soccer Morning and pick all of the music for the breaks, now's your chance. That's still out there. I don't know how many we've got left. There's a couple of the Howler Magazine perks left as well. It's been a fantastic start. If we just push through, we should be getting this done very, very quickly, and we can all move on, and Soccer Morning will be here for the foreseeable future and into the great part of the World Cup year of 2014. All right. Thanks to our guest, Doug McIntyre, Tim Vickery, everybody who called. That's going to do it for the Thursday edition. Tomorrow's Friday, right? Tomorrow's Friday. I'm hoping that you can hear it again. It's coming. I'm hoping it holds off one more day and I don't get sick and I'm not missing any shows. I'm making that guarantee. I'll be here tomorrow. We'll see you then. Bye.
The days on the boulevard I landed. We used to kick routines and the presence was fitting. It was I, the abstract. And me, the 5-footer. I kicks the mad style.